All right, welcome back to the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. Your hosts are Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escajedo, and it's another Tuesday night. How's it going?
Tuesday. There ain't no songs about Tuesday nights, man. You notice
You
that? I
know,
mean, there's songs about Friday night, there's songs about Saturday night.
Sundays, but not
Yeah,
Sunday nights.
yeah,
It's another Sunday night, and I ain't got nobody.
yeah.
Nope, it
There's
doesn't
even
work.
even there's Manic Monday, but ain't
Yeah,
no songs about Tuesday.
there,
And I
there
think
is.
that's wrong.
Yeah,
I don't know.
there's even
Can you
there's
count
e-
Tuesday's Gone? No, because Tuesday's Gone, Leonard Skinner, that's about a girl named Tuesday.
Ruby Tuesday's about a girl named Tuesday, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh well, I digress. Hi, not much going on now.
Thursday doesn't have much going on as far as song, stuff.
No, no, not that I can think of.
Well, it's a Saturday night and I just got paid. Cool about my money, don't wanna save. My
And
heart
that,
says go cool. Have a time. It's Saturday night and I feel fine. Gonna rock it up.
now there was Living It Up Friday night. And, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different tunes about Friday and Saturday, but nothing for Tuesday. We need to change that. We need to change that.
Tuesday's dragging, but
Hmm.
like an acapella.
Yeah.
Tuesday's dragging butt or something.
Hmm. And then for Wednesday, it's meh. It's Wednesday. Meh.
Man, 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 man. It's
Yeah.
Wednesday, man, 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 man.
And I feel like eh. I mean, it's just kind of there.
Thursday, there's some glimpse of hope out there.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
talking about. I have two bits.
Okay.
One bit is actually musically related.
Okay.
So I guess we'll lead with that because it's all that
What?
Steve. It's all the rage that Steve loves to talk about.
Why don't we save that for second? Because my standby, if we get to it, is kind of music related too.
Well, then it can lead into music related and music related,
Uh huh.
and then Steve is going to have a smorgasbord of awesomeness.
Oh, okay.
Don't you see how that works? It's like
I
we
do.
we roll out that music conversation keg out the
Hmm.
door from the log cabin sitting on the hill. We
Hmm.
roll it down the hill, and as it rolls and it pops open, because I finished then a smaller keg appears and it keeps rolling. And then Steve has the long journey through the woods down the
Hmm.
ravine of awesome music talk.
Well, see, I just didn't want to put him to sleep this early in, because he's already saying, "Cool, nap time."
But mine isn't music. Mine is totally music related, but mine has to do with engineering. And
Okay.
and actually, if I say it like that, I can see how 90% of people will say, "Oh yeah, engineering, music." I can see how that could put people to sleep right away. But this is just a small little
Yeah, I
little
can
bit.
see it now. Steve just went.
There's a guy
Okay.
that I ran into online because that's how we run into people now.
Hmm.
I ran into to someone and there was this fantastic. It's not on the street no more.
Hmm.
Usually you say, I was on the corner of, whatnot and Vine, and I had a conversation with no, not anymore. Now it's more like, online. Well, there's this dude, uh, somewhere in the heart of the country, um, and about 20 years ago,
Hmm.
he decided that he enjoyed old music from the 1930s, 40s, and in fact, this kind of relates to you with your microphone and all this and that too. It's weird. Um, I- I'm seeing a pattern. I don't know if the pattern is due to coincidence, like we've talked to in the past, or if the universe is conspiring to propel us forward with an actual narrative that we can hold on to, like a little boat on the sea. But maybe I'm wrong. Um, this guy over 20 years ago got the notion, there's no place that you can go to and record like musicians did back in the 40s and 50s, where
Okay.
all the equipment itself is actually to the level of tubes,
Hmm.
um, to get that rich sound that you would find in those old Nat King Cole, um,
That old analog sound. Yeah.
that very rich
Hmm.
analog sound that was quite different because it was all recorded in one go. There
Hmm.
was no layering, although you can make the argument that in people like, what's this guitar player name that was really that he invented the layered recording.
Oh, Les Paul.
You could argue Les Paul was experimenting with that stuff and he
Oh,
was
yeah.
putting some crazy stuff out. But the rule of thumb for most of American recording across the board, up until Les Paul started fiddling,
Uh-huh.
which led into the stuff we heard in the mid to late 60s, early to mid to late 60s and beyond, was one solid take. So you have your Elvis Presley and the rest of his band behind him,
Uh-huh.
and they could have multiple microphones, mind you. Usually it was two plus or one for the band and one for the or two, three,
Hmm.
but they all went direct to the recording tape and were fed in there. So the guy mixing the volume of the different instruments, um, he had to regulate it and then record it.
Hmm.
And so you captured that ambiance. Well, the epitome of such recordings were things like Nat King Cole, if I can bring one to but there's lots
Hmm.
of jazz albums too, where you can hear that rich, like if you're sitting in the
Yeah.
room. And if you remember the songs from the 60s, you no longer felt like you're in the room necessarily. You almost felt like there was this musical, artistic, it wasn't real world accurate. It was
Hmm.
more to do with some spatial, which was interesting in itself. Anyways, the guy, it took him 20 years, little by little, he built his own amplifiers. He built his own mixing board. Except the recording
Hmm.
device, he built everything.
Hmm.
And at the end of the his presentation, I mean, you see everything. He
Hmm.
even built some amplifiers that have no knobs. He said,
Yeah.
"I know what I want, and this amplifier, so nobody can come and move it." It's like that. And those harsh decisions were the decisions that musicians and music engineers made back in the day because they had a limited, and even so, they produced incredible things with the microphones and
Sure.
stuff that they had. So after to wrap it up, he went through and explained that he says, and now it's taken me 20 years, and here I have, or not 20 years. His thinking started a long time ago, but he actually initiated from like 2008, 2009, something like
Hmm.
that. So it took him whatever that time is, which is roughly going to be 20 years sooner or later
Yeah.
here coming up. But so he says, and at best, I'm going to produce at the beginning one album per year because there's no studio. You can go to Hollywood, you can go anywhere. They might have one piece of equipment, but not from beginning to end can you find that musicians can go in and record as it was done back in the day.
Hmm.
And he has produced maybe more, but he produced one album of this jazz lady, that saxophone lady,
Hmm.
and they play it. And dude, it's like it sounds like you're sitting in one of those old. It sounds like you're in a room. Very powerful. So I found it curious,
Is
curious thing.
Now, are these mono recordings or are they stereo
He
for
has
today's
stereo.
equipment?
He has the ability for stereo,
Hmm.
but whereas today you can tweak the stereo where, like, let's say in the middle, you're in the middle,
Hmm.
so you're getting the same signal on both sides.
Right.
Um, Today you can tweak it so that it's like an eighth off towards the
Hmm.
left or a
Yeah.
quarter. You can tweak with it, but back in the day they had center, then they had center, left, right.
Hmm.
They always had center, left, right, but it would come out mono. But the point is
Hmm.
that he has built his board so that you have only one choice:
Yeah.
center, fully left,
Or
fully
fully
right. There
right.
is no in between. So it's all the limitations
Hmm.
that they had back in the day.
Okay. And does he record this on single track or is it multiple tracks?
See, that part, he can do stereo, so he has so the
Well,
recording.
what I'm getting at is can the band come in and play the piece and then the singer come in and sing over that?
No,
No, it all
I
has
mean
to be done all at once.
I'm sure he could overcome that objection and
Mhm.
do it.
Mhm.
So I think, but the idea is not that.
Right. The idea is as it just to record it live, as if you're on stage performing in front of an audience.
Like
Like
people did
you,
in studios, yeah.
yeah.
But
Okay.
but he does have one equipment. I think he has two
Mhm.
that is modern, and that is a digital tracking thing. So
Mhm.
that because he says that back then you had to, like at the end, everything, the signal is all recorded. At
Mhm.
the end, when people had to record something and go back, you had
Mhm.
to rewind the tape
Mhm. Yeah.
and find the place. And he
Right.
says, for expediency, I've installed this digital. So even in that scenario,
Mhm.
but just the same, it's freaking fantastic.
Okay, so it is digital recording. He's not like recording
No,
on reel to reel tape or
no,
anything,
he's recording on reel to reel, but like he's got the reel to
but it's
reel,
got a digital buffer.
but he's got a digital connected to it so that it's recording
Okay.
at the same time. He can find the place where the re-recording needs to begin in case he has
Mhm.
to splice for expediency
Okay.
sake. So he's got a signal going that's all analog,
Uh,
and then he's got a final thing where it is digital.
mhm.
But that final thing that is digital, according to how I saw the thing and
Mhm.
what he explained, there could be some variation there, but he's got the final digital.
Mhm.
But prior to the digital, he's recording on tape so that
Mhm.
it's all, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of the deal with that.
So are they doing vinyl pressings with that, or is he releasing this? Are they releasing MP3 or what?
He didn't say. He had
Okay.
one lady that he produced, and they
Mhm.
played one song with saxophone and drums and piano, and it sounded
Mhm.
marvelous. I mean, it really did. Um, but he didn't go into specifics of anything. It was just a showcase of his ideas and his process
Mhm.
of building the studio equipment. And that's basically. And then his at the end, he said it took me that long, and that he's going to produce at best one or two albums every couple of years,
Yeah.
and that he's doing it not because he wants to be a full-blown studio,
Uh-huh.
but that he's doing it for his
Okay.
pleasure.
Okay, that was my next question is he booking groups to come in and record? I mean, or are groups knocking on his door saying, "Dude, can we come record?" Or how is he working with this?
Yeah,
So,
I don't know, that's what he said. So
okay.
if he sticks to it, it means that you cannot ask him and have and expect to get yourself into that studio. It's more to do with whatever pet projects that he wants
He
people to
has.
come in and
Okay.
record.
Okay. Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
But could you
Yeah.
imagine like some sort of Louisiana?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of groups that I can think of that I would like to hear record on that. Um, because that would be some amazing stuff. I mean, well, Jim Dockrell here says Dave Grohl bought all the old equipment from Sound City Studio, including Nev console. Okay, the documentary is called Sound City. All right. There is a certain warmth to those old analog recordings that you just can't fake digital. I mean, I know there are filters and there are effects you can apply and stuff like that. You can get real close. But when you put on something like, as you said, by Nat King Cole or old Bobby Vinton or Johnny Mathis or something like that, there's a warmth that's there that just isn't in newer recordings.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of that has to do with what you're playing it back on
And
because
the method of recording initially.
mhm.
The fact that you
Well, true.
record the fact that you record today,
Mhm.
you record, let's say, a guitar
Mhm.
to a backbeat that is a pre-recorded beat. You
Mhm.
pass it on to the drummer. He plays over that. You extract or retract the that initial like template beat.
Mhm.
Now you have two instruments. Then you send it off to the vocal guy, and then you
Right.
send, and so it becomes And so the it becomes layers instead of a performance,
Right.
and
Exactly.
that changes everything.
It changes a lot. But where I mean, because you go back to old radio, they literally had an orchestra there
Hmm.
that would play with the singer of the week. If it's, oh gosh, Mel Torme is the singer of the week on our radio show. They had their house band, their house orchestra there that played.
Hmm.
And they would get together and rehearse and what have you. But then when they hit that button and they went live, that's it. They were live.
Yeah.
And the sound was only as good as their recording equipment, obviously, but it was also what you heard was only as good as what you were listening to it through.
Hmm.
So when you're driving around in your car on that old AM radio in your 63 Chevy, and you had a choice of volume, and then you had the little ring behind that knob that went towards bass or went towards treble, when that was your only choice, one speaker in the middle of the dash, and if you were really, really high speed, you had another speaker in the package tray in the back. That was all you got. It all came out of one speaker, so it had to be mixed right.
Yeah.
But
I mean
then
that.
you bring that home and you put that on a home, that you bring that album home and you put it on a home stereo system. Even
Yeah.
old mono recordings had a certain warmth to them.
Yeah.
They had a certain vibe to them where you could tell that everything was recorded all at once. It wasn't 15 layers,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. I mean, each of the two versions that you just said,
Mm-hmm.
with the analog stuff and then the
Mm-hmm.
15 layer thing that you're saying, they both have advantages
Mm-hmm.
in terms of creative. The one from
Mm-hmm.
back in the day is a pretty neat, accurate reproduction of what you would hear if you went and sat inside a nightclub or cafe
Mm-hmm.
and experimented for yourself the music as it came out of the instruments live while you're drinking your cocoa or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
And the other one is that a very, which has become the popular one, at least
Mm-hmm.
for the last 60 years. The other one is a very strange, what we have today with all the cool stuff that we've experimented and enjoyed with all the Boston, the
Mm-hmm.
Beatles, all these things is not obviously natural in terms of something that you would experiment or enjoy or in person. Like there's no way that Lovely Rita Meter Maid, with the way they pan it and the sounds, that
Mm-hmm.
that would occur naturally in a live space, as an example.
Right. Right. Right.
So um we have a different experience what we grew up with, even
Mm-hmm.
throughout the generations, where they play with sound like a paintbrush in a different way than like a
Yeah.
banjo group sitting inside some sort of coffee hall or whatnot. So
Right.
so they're, and I think they're both awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They both have their place because, I mean, you can't imagine. Oh gosh, let me pick an album here. You can't imagine Dark Side of the Moon without all the little spoken word in the background when they, talk to some roadies and crew and, people just around the studio when they were recording the album. They just asked them a series of questions and recorded their answers and just
Mm.
interspersed that in there.
Yeah.
And you can't. So without that, something is just gone.
Yeah.
Um, when you think of the reverb or an echo in a voice,
Yeah.
um, and just creating that echo in a voice and have it match the BPM of the tune, because the engineer had to do all that. It wasn't just push two buttons on a console and the computer would handle it.
Yeah.
That was some talent.
Oh yeah, they were brilliant.
Oh yeah, and so in many, many ways, the recording engineers were just as talented as the musicians out there making the music.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, but they both have their place,
Yeah, I
and
think they do.
I
Yeah.
think there's a lot to be said, depending upon the mood and depending upon the vibe you're after. There's a lot to be said for that old, warm analog recording with the reel to reel spinning fast back behind, and are you getting all, yeah, getting all this, but it's a double-edged sword because one guy messes up, you got to start over because everything is live.
That's the trade-off. That's why the other thing became more popular. And by the way, there's a caveat
Mm-hmm.
juxtaposing the newer
Mm-hmm.
mid 1960s or early
Mm-hmm.
1960s forward type of experimentation as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the prior. There's a
Yeah.
caveat between that. It wasn't that it went full on layer by layer. What
Mm-hmm.
happened was that people usually had an aspect of what came prior, which is you would lay down a bass track with drums and the basic instruments,
Mm-hmm.
but you had enough space to add creativity with extra layers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of more accurate, although people since then went full on crazy and they
Yeah.
recorded stuff in separate layers individually.
Exactly. I mean, um, some bands, you can see why they would want to do it that way. Like you look at Rush, something like Tom Sawyer. You have Geddy Lee doing the vocals, he's playing the bass, and he's playing the keyboard all at once. He had to learn how to do that all at once in order to play that live.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Boston, More Than a Feeling. There are so many layers there. It was very, very difficult to play live without two or three guitarists because Tom Scholz kept the layering up.
Yeah.
So the live recording would never sound like the studio album. It couldn't without adding additional guitars to sustain a note or take off with a pick slide in a certain segment while he's holding a bend and really jamming that note and have a pick slide come over the top of it and then get into
Yeah.
back into the groove.
Yeah.
Just something simple like that, but the song isn't the same without it. I mean, it's glaring. It's right there. If that pick slide isn't right there where people expect it to be, you ruined the song.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know I'm talking in circles. It's kind of a weird thing, but yeah,
No,
I
well, it's true.
I, I think it's cooler than hell what this guy did.
Yeah.
I wish him nothing but success, but I do hope he does open it up to allow some acts to come in and record their own stuff with him as engineer, of course. But I can think of a couple of groups that I would like to see in there and do that. Have you ever watched any videos on the YouTube channel Postmodern Jukebox?
I don't think so.
They will take newer songs, and turn them around, spin them around, standing up on their head, and like they'll do a 40s version of it
Mm.
with just a basic drum kit and an upright bass, and they've got some brass there and somebody on piano, but it's a relatively modern tune. I mean, something that would be playing on the radio today, and
Right.
just put a different spin on it completely. It's actually pretty cool.
I have seen one channel that turns modern songs into medieval
Yes,
chamber music and stuff.
yes, I've seen that one as well.
I like that
Um,
one a lot.
but I think if they would get those people in there and record Haley Reinert on vocals and things like that, also get the Stray Cats back together because that rockabilly is perfect for that type of recording.
It is. Yeah.
Get Jim Phantom and Brian Setzer and Lee Rocker in there with that upright bass and that basic snare kit, and him on that Gretsch guitar. That is perfect for that style of recording. I mean, that's what it was made for, is rockabilly.
Have you ever heard of Magic Alex?
Doesn't ring a bell right off the top.
He worked with the Beatles for a little while.
Mm, doesn't ring a bell. Maybe I don't know just don't know the name. Maybe I've heard the story, but I don't know the name.
Magic Alex was um, a scientist.
Hmm.
He was a Greek gentleman that established himself in London,
Hmm.
and either Paul, I think it was Paul, or it was John. One of the, I think it was John, because John was the crazier one, but don't quote
Hmm.
me on it. And by John, I mean John Lennon. For those out there in the future, in order to grab the well, I said Beatles, but 100, 200 years from now, it's going to
Hmm.
be like Beatles. What is that? You
Yeah,
know?
we spray for those now.
Yeah. So Magic Alex, either John Lennon. I think it's let's go with John Lennon. We can always go and look. Um, was so taken by him
Hmm.
because he was in the '60s a guy that was creative in ways where he would use like metallic paints to make cars glow, and like
Hmm.
John wanted his car to glow, so he painted John's car, and he wore a lab coat.
Hmm.
Like that was his. Okay, let's put it this way: he was slightly a hack
Uh-huh.
to a great degree, but since he had like when you go to the library and you get yourself a book of science,
Hmm.
and they have experiments in there and you can show them to your friends, and it's like, or like a magic trick and stuff.
Hmm.
It was kind of like that kind of a character as far as what the Beatles documentary shows him as. I don't want to speak badly about, but it kind of gives the impression. And so there's a video where he says he comes on camera with like one of those thin microphones, and he says, I am Magic Alex, I am a scientist man. And so that was his, you know what I'm saying? It's kind
Yeah.
of like, how in the '70s, like with the disco, hi, I'm the Indian now, or hey,
Hmm.
I'm the welder,
Hmm.
and stuff. Like it's like he took on his little persona in order to acquire some sort of like popularity.
Hmm.
That,
Legitimacy. Yeah.
that's the impression that I got. It was kind of like that vibe, but John was totally taken by him, and he got into conversation, and it ends up that John asked him, well, do you think you can create a better studio, or conversely, or opposite of that, Magic Alex saw the studio and he says, I could do a better job creating a studio. So he said, yeah. And John Lennon was, and so they started setting up for the Let It Be.
Hmm.
And so they gave him funding. And one day it was ready and the Beatles came in, and they come into the room, and Magic Alex had installed, he had zero understanding of music.
Hmm.
And this is where it was he had installed many speakers, all facing the center of the room, all
Hmm.
around the room.
Hmm.
And if anybody that does like music recording and stuff, they know you have to isolate things. You can't have. So it was like it's like it was hard. They walked in. They had to. So in the thing, it ends up that like they fired his ass or something, and they pulled, and they had to go pulling all the little microphone
Speakers out.
speakers out, and they had to gut the whole. George Harrison said something to the effect of, "It was a total mess. We had to gut the whole thing so we could
Start
start."
over.
Yeah,
That's funny.
but
That's
that's like
funny.
that's how it seemed to. They would get enamored with somebody because they had that sort of thing.
They associated with some very interesting characters back in the day. Those four specifically. I mean, from about 65 till the end, there were some interesting individuals hanging around with the Beatles, both collectively as the Beatles and individually with the four. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like he was really. I think, don't quote me on this, but just so like if he was good at soldering, which it seemed, he would use like little lights, and he would add little lights to something with
Uh-huh.
the simple thing of soldering. Like the little LEDs that we use now. Just the little
Hmm.
ones, the bulb one, and he'd create little things, and to these young Beatles guys, are like, holy smoke, wow, that's so cool. And so
Hmm.
this is Magic Alex, and he's like a science man, and And so they brought him into the fold because it was so darn awesome and stuff. But he really, it wasn't applicable. It was applicable that he's cool in that it's weird stuff, but
Mhm.
it's not applicable in the terms of like
Yeah.
doing recording music. You know,
I got a neat way of flipping over hamburgers on a griddle, but I'm not ready to open up a restaurant.
exactly.
Oh man. Let's see. Jim says John Bonham was a fantastic drummer, and the speed of the music still changes throughout the song. Yes, and I agree. He did that to introduce tension and then to take it away. You know, they'd really get into something like Moby Dick, and you can see there's a few little wavers there where the tempo increases and decreases there. Whether that was by design or he was just tired as heck, I don't
No,
know.
no music. When you sit and play together,
Hmm.
because we're human beings.
Sure.
Uh, any if you don't have a click track,
Hmm.
you a song is going to fluctuate between
Hmm.
slightly a little bit faster, slower
Right.
until it ends
Right.
in human terms, and
Exactly.
that's why in terms of so originally that was fine.
Hmm.
More it was fine because everybody played together and recorded together. Later, when layers were happening, if you were in LA and the other
Hmm.
guy was in wherever, London, and the box of tape was sent over so that a new layer would happen, um, it was better to have some sort of guiding track, click
Sure.
track, in order to. They always had, but it became more important because if not, it's going to
Yeah.
be all delayed audio coming, different instruments in the wrong, and it's going to
Hmm.
sound like a mess. So, but the Led Zeppelin one, they did speed it up for what was the song, uh, Stairway to Heaven. They did do that purposefully.
Oh yes, yes. That was done
Yeah,
to drive tension and to bring to ramp and amp everything up. But
yeah,
Stairway to Heaven was a progression from the very beginning notes to the very end notes. It sped up the entire way, and they kept adding elements and then changing elements and taking elements away. I
yeah,
mean, when you start with recorders and a acoustic guitar, and you end up with all four of them just jamming their backsides off,
yeah.
that was definitely done on
I'm
purpose.
laughing because I just saw Snow Crusher's thing. He was, and I'm
Yeah,
thinking to
yeah.
myself, Snow Crusher, don't you? If if it weren't for the fact that we have a very unique and cozy audience, anybody come. So it's you're setting up any new incomers, which doesn't matter. You're basic. It's like talk about the anti-promotion. It's like we can't get a break in this place.
Eh,
And that's the first thing that. Oh no, I don't. But that's the first thing that popped into my head. I'm thinking, well, for goodness sakes! I mean, we can't.
But Jim goes further. He says today they would stretch and shrink each bar of the music digitally so they're all exactly the same time, and takes out the human factor. Yeah, I agree 100%. I agree. You can over process. Let people be people. You know,
That's
stop
not
it
what.
with the
That's not
auto
what.
tune.
Yeah, but that's not what people. They want that tech. Well, I don't know what they want, but I know what I don't want. I don't want that techno crap.
Well, not only that, there is, and I don't remember who it was that did it. I may have linked you to it. But they were talking about can people get as emotionally attached to music now as we did in the 60s, 70s, and 80s because it is processed so much and everything is uh, as close to perfect as you can get it. You know, when Freddie Mercury sang up, when he increased pitch and went up, he didn't always land spot on that note, but that was humanity. You know, you could hear a voice crack. You could hear he wasn't super flat, but he wasn't absolutely spot on the note, but it still sounded excellent. You know, that there's a lot of humanity there that you and I probably would never notice just as the pedestrian listener, but we connect with it. It's hard to connect with something that sounds mechanical. It's really hard to build some sort of an emotional attachment to that piece of music. You might love the lyric, you might love the vibe you get from it, but you just can't connect as easily with it because it is processed. It's over processed, it's overdone. So, yeah. And Greg, right there, Joplin auto tuned would be crap. Yeah, you can't auto tune Janis Joplin. But people who have never heard Janis Joplin sing will listen to something like Cry Baby or Ball and Chain or Me and Bobby McGee or Piece of My Heart and just, holy cow, she's fantastic. Yeah. That's just raw talent. That's just her singing her heart out. And she never went smooth. It was, I think the smoothest tune she ever did was Mercedes Benz. I may be wrong. But even Me and Bobby McGee, she lit it up towards the end. And yeah, I can't imagine trying to auto tune that. No, you don't. Some things just need to be left alone. And if that's not your cup of tea, imagine trying to auto tune Patsy Cline. You'd start a civil war. You know,
Yeah.
there's just some things you don't mess with.
All those genres lean towards the blues, which does have one of the qualities of the blues is that slight drag when people either play a musical note or sing a musical note, and that you can't, it's wrong technically considering like beats and stuff, all quartered off, but it's correct. It's dynamic, and so you can't auto tune that and expect not to lose the soul of it.
Yeah, or even when they come in with that vocal, because the melody is playing, and maybe the singer comes in just half a measure late, but speeds up that vocal line.
Yeah,
just speeds up that phrase. There ain't nothing I can do about it, honey. Rather than ain't nothing I can do about it, honey.
For some reason, you doing that. My mind went. Who were the Pointers? Was it the Pointer Sisters? No, who were? Remember the I'm in the army now.
Andrew's Sisters.
You instead of blues, you took me back even further to was 1950s or 40s?
That was 40s. That was World War II. Yeah. Then Bette Midler brought that back in the 70s.
Bugle Boy.
The Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. And she had the perfect voice for that type of music. The absolute perfect voice for that music.
I saw a clip of that. Maybe that's why it reminded when you said that, because I got the little melody going. At the end of the clip of them, which they've turned into a music video now, but at the end of it comes out from like the back out of a door, comes out Costello, because he was, I guess, in that movie. I probably watched it back in the 80s, but I don't remember it now.
I don't remember which movie it was, but I do know the movie you're talking about, and it was Abbott and Costello, and the Andrews Sisters was in that movie.
Yeah, it was great, dude. It was
Jim Dockrell says Neil Young auto-tuned would no longer be Neil Young. No one sings off-key like him. 2 words for you, Jim. Chris Christopherson. That boy, I mean, I'm no singer, and neither is Chris Christopherson. He can write a song, but that man is exactly like me. He can't carry a tune in a bucket.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah. He's a killer songwriter. The guy has written so many hits and so many great pieces of music. But there is a definite lack of Chris Christopherson albums in my house. Rita Coolidge, another story. She can sing.
Look at
Christopherson,
Look at Bob Dylan. I've told you before. I went to see him maybe 5, 6 years ago.
mm-hmm.
There were other bands playing. When he came up on stage, the crowd just started leaving, going somewhere. You saw them going to buy beer, and like, it just emptied out. Only the true diehards.
Mm-hmm.
Because I owned his music. I would listen to his music again
Mm-hmm.
and again and again. So I went and sat up front, but I realized that it was like when I went up, because I was sitting out on the lawn.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get into the close area because we bought like general tickets or whatever you call them. And but I walked up because I saw people leaving. I walked up, and one of the guards said, I stood and I was looking from the gate,
Mm-hmm.
and the guard said, "Go ahead, man," because there's nobody there. They're all leaving.
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah, go ahead." I was like, but like anybody else, like, okay, do the math. Everybody was leaving, and I was like, "Oh, I can get in." So
Yeah.
my mind is completely different than this whole ocean
Yeah.
of people. I got to sit down maybe 6 rows behind and watch Dylan with a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And he was just dragging the song. It was cool, but like none of the cool songs that you hear on record sounded like what he was playing on. None of them.
Yeah.
None.
That was my problem with Dylan, was when you saw him live, you never knew what you were going to get. You never knew what you were going to get on his studio albums.
Yeah.
You know, Lay Lady Lay, that voice that he used in that tune, he can sing when he wants to. But then you go to, what would be another one? Knocking on Heaven's Door. Close, not bad. A few little, maybe, don't know yet.
Knocking in the live version.
Mm-hmm.
On Heaven's Door.
Yeah, you never know what you were going to get with Dylan.
And it's like, dude, because it's selfish, because the idea is that this is the artist expressing himself. I want to hear the tune like I've heard it on record.
I want to hear, yeah, exactly.
I don't want to hear lay a lady lay.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, no, dude, no, do it the way you do it on the album, please.
Saw him in Reno when he was touring with Tom Petty, and there were no big screens. It was just the stage. And the arena we were in, the stage is down at, floor level, and all the seats went up from there. Because it was basically a basketball arena that they would have concerts in. And he had that 10-gallon hat on and a guitar with his head down the entire time. Couldn't see his face. No screens. That could have been anybody there. That could have been anybody sitting there playing guitar. The only way you knew it was him was that voice. So we still don't know if we saw Bob Dylan. That could have been anybody lip syncing.
It was pretty cool. I did get to see Chuck Berry at the casino when I worked in the casino. I couldn't believe it. I was working, and there was a bar that opened into the floor, but it was, it's a small space, and there's a small. Let's put it this way: the stage where he sang is what people typically use there back then, at least, for karaoke stuff. So it's that kind of cheap, small karaoke, little junky stage. He was playing with a band on that stage, and by him placing himself, Chuck Berry, with a band on a dingy stage inside a smoky casino was amazing.
Yeah.
He got up, got into the crowd. And by the way, they were all Cubans. I mean, we're in Miami. So they probably know, but like half of them, they don't, it's not like they're into it to that degree. I was, because I grew up studying these things and seeing him there, and I was like, but I was working, so I couldn't, but he had a little sailor hat, like a captain's hat.
Yep.
And he was
that
just
was
playing.
One of his trademarks.
He sat on a stool and he was like doing thing, and the band probably as was the case with Chuck Berry, never had practiced with him at all.
Yeah.
Most of the time throughout his career, because he's so because his music is so ingrained in American history,
Mhm.
bar none, any musician around the United States or the world need not practice with him prior. They just begin to play his songs and
Yeah,
he does
they
his thing.
know it because they probably grew up. That's how they learned to play the instrument, was playing some of his tunes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Paul McCartney does several similar things. I mean, he is known. Well, Paul McCartney and Eric Clapton both are known to go to venues that where a band is playing, and maybe they'll have an open mic night, and he'll just walk in the place and start playing. Get up on stage with whoever's up there jamming, and hey, you know this song? All right, let's play it. And off they go.
I think the Beach Boys got sued once because they admitted that, oh, this is totally we're totally riffing off Chuck Berry.
Mhm.
Although it's apparent that like 80% of the songs across the United States throughout the decades are based on that little rotation that he does with his music.
Yeah.
Them admitting it like that, I think caused. I believe that that's the case. It was
Mhm.
the Beach Boys, but we'd have to look and see. Some famous musician, likely the Beach Boys, got busted, and I think the Beatles might have had some trouble at some point as well.
Yeah. I don't
The
know.
Beatles, the Beatles had when
Yeah.
John Lennon wrote come on, something something flat top, um, come
Oh,
together."
come together. Yeah.
John said, "Oh, that lyric is a total rip of Chuck Berry."
Hmm. Here come
And
up, come old flat top. He come grooving up slowly.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, Chuck Berry. It's a totally different song, but since he took the lyric, it became a problem. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it never, it was a lawyer to lawyer type,
Yeah. Lawsuit. Yeah.
looking for
Well,
money.
the similar thing happened with Meatloaf and Jim Steinman, in that their lawyers were suing one another, but they were talking to each other on the phone and emailing each other back and forth the whole time. And their lawyers would get mad. You're consorting with the enemy. Like he's been a friend of mine for years. You I can hire and fire. He's my friend. You know.
Yeah.
So Jim also threw in the Stones, SRV, April Wine, all did albums and appearances at the El Macambo in Toronto, which was a seedy little bar. And SRV live at El Macambo is one of the greatest live recordings ever made.
Are you telling me that El Macambo is not recorded in Texas?
No, it's in Canada. You didn't
Really?
know that?
I did not know that. I had the VHS and I would play it. The VHS was something that I'd play back in the day
Mm-hmm.
when it
Over and
first.
over again.
I would play the VHS tape and think to myself, why isn't there an album of this?
Yeah.
Of this just live? Because everything he did in that,
Mm-hmm.
everything he did in that live, in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
was gold.
Yep.
Everything. And the
Yep.
visuals of him turning around, flipping the guitar, just everything, and playing the Jimi Hendrix songs as he did, and the little crowd, the
Yeah.
fact that he's in a little space. I don't like big concert stuff. Like I don't want to see oceans of people. I
Some
like
of
that.
it is okay. Some of it is okay. And it has its place, but you're right. The small venue performances like that. And I will, I keep using the phrase to you, is this the hill you want to die on? I will die on this hill. I think that is one of the greatest live recordings ever made.
Yeah,
Ever made.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of things going on at every
Mm-hmm.
single turn in that recording. I
Yeah.
didn't know it was in Toronto. I thought it was in Texas, and I guess um, I would have assumed that for the obvious reasons of why you would assume that,
Mm-hmm.
because
Well,
you
he's a
know,
Texas blues player. I mean,
right?
and the name El Macambo, you don't automatically associate that with Canada. So,
No, you don't. I was thinking quite well placed in
mhm,
Texas,
mhm.
you know. But that's an
Yeah,
interesting thing. Is the El Macambo still operational?
I think it closed down. I'm not sure. Jim probably knows. I think it closed down, but it was a very small venue. Man, you only have to watch the video to see that. I mean, it is a very small crowd. And the stage was like, I mean, they had coverings on it and everything, but I would not be surprised to find out that it was made out of 2x4s and plywood.
Now,
We're
if
not
you told,
talking about a high speed, low drag production here.
yeah, no, it was incredible. But
Oh,
if you
yeah.
told me, that live at Austin City Limits was also recorded in on Toronto, then I would tell you that you have broken the fabric of reality. Can
Yeah.
we
No,
still say that
no.
live Austin
That
City Limits is in actual
that
Texas?
is recorded in Texas, yes. And both of his performance on that show were gold as well. But
But not as good as
Macombo will always reign supreme with me.
yes.
Okay, Jim said that no, El Macombo is no longer. So it's gone. But yeah, I agree. Well,
Yeah.
let me kind of change directions here and throw something at you. And let's go to the other extreme because we've been reveling in the old. But as we both know, the new sometimes has its place, sometimes it doesn't.
Is this gonna make Steve happy, or is this gonna make him roll his eyes?
If he it may make him snore more or less. I'm not sure. I really am not sure.
That's if he's even. That's if because we really went for broke. Like I just wanted I just intended on a little curiosity, but then you said something and then I said something back,
That's
and
the
then you
way this
said something,
goes.
and 5 hours into it, we're at El
Mhm.
Macombo. We
Yeah.
start we
Well, we're almost an hour in, so that's pretty cool. But let me go in a slightly different direction because technology advances. As you know, we spent the first 50 minutes talking about the old. Just a second here. Excuse me.
sound effect was something like hachu
Yeah,
hachu.
very similar. Um, have you seen this new thing? Well, it's new to me anyway. God knows it's probably, oh man, 10 years now. Yeah, it couldn't be that much. The new AI technology
Mhm.
is such that you can now create images just based on this AI technology. There are several groups that have been doing this. This is kind of a combination of open source and privately funded, where they have fed so much data into these AI systems. We're talking millions of images and millions of textures and descriptions and keywords to where you can type in some keywords and it will create an image for you in a style that you set. It could be like pop art, or it could be like ancient Greek, or dark fantasy, or light fantasy, or something like that. You kind of set the tone for the image you want.
Or disco styles of the 1970s.
Psychedelia of the 60s, you can set that style and then you type in certain keywords and it will generate an AI image. And what people are starting to do is I'm seeing these videos pop up on YouTube where they will sit down with the lyrics to a tune, they'll set a style, and then they'll type in the first line of the lyrics and let it generate an image. And if you don't like that image, you can just regenerate and it'll create another image based on those words. And what they're doing is, like, for instance, obviously the first one somebody's going to do is Stairway to Heaven. Take the first line of lyrics, type it into that AI generator, generate an image, download and save that image. Take the second line, generate it, don't like that image, generate another one. Oh, I like that image, save it. And then they take all of these images they have collected and they put it together with the music. So as the lyrics are being sung, the image is changing and then fading to the next image. And it's really coming up with some cool compositions. It started off as one or two, but now it's going in all directions.
I guess one thing I could add to that from my recent doodling across the internet
Mm-hmm.
is that there's a site called MyHeritage
Mm-hmm.
that they're kind of like similar to like Ancestry or 23andMe.
Yeah.
But watch where I'm going. It's directly linked to AI. What I'm going to say, and some of you have probably seen it. These people are out of Israel. MyHeritage is,
I didn't know that.
and they have. Oh yeah, so like if you have like Jewish background,
Mm-hmm.
they really try to pull that out of
Mm-hmm.
the mix and stuff. But they do across the world, so it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike the other places, they've gone into photo repairing,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what you showed me the other night.
Yeah, I was going to
Um,
bring that up as well.
so I won't go into that specifically, but it's kind of going to overlap anyhow. But
Yes.
it's kind of like what you showed me the other night. So, in order to compete with their competitors, they've started doing things like photo augmentation. So if you have something with a bunch of scratches,
Mm-hmm.
it's not free. You have to pay an additional thing in order to do the thing. But the point is that you would feed your you would upload your photo with all the screwed up artifacts, and
Mm-hmm.
and they'll clean it up for you best as can. Well, they went further last year, the year before last, and they said you can upload a photo of a face, and you can have your ancestors talk by something that you type and
Mm-hmm.
see, and they'll generate the face movement so you
Yes.
can see how they would have a semblance of how they would have acted and tweaked their face and smiled and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I did a few of those and posted them back in a couple of years ago, and then they came out with a new one which has become all the rage,
Mm-hmm.
bar none, across the internet. There's TikTok videos about it. It's taken on some sort of like life of its own. Well, the new feature is that, like, let's say it's an extra payment, but
Mm-hmm.
so they're getting into that. They're making money not just through the DNA, but they're doing all sorts of side
Yeah.
hustles and stuff. Well, you upload. So, like, let's say you wanted to do it yourself. I'll explain what it is, but this way, you would upload about 10 photos of your face,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll feed it through their proprietary AI system,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll take all those snapshots of you standing, of you this, and that, posing in one way or the other, and they'll create a AI version of you through various um, times in history, medieval uniforms, and
Mm-hmm.
so people like that because they get to see them, and they give it back to you and stuff, and everything that comes out from their
Mm-hmm.
site. Like, let's say you do one, it's you with a knight's armor,
Mm-hmm.
really, chivalry type, or
Mm-hmm.
you as a pilot in World War II with and it's really, and they make it look like not you, it's you, but it's you almost like grander than life,
Uh-huh.
with the coloration, and it's just an incredible thing. And they show all these awesome shots of people as examples so they can get you to purchase and go and do it.
Sure.
Well, TikTok and maybe other places, but I ran across it through TikTok, which, by the way, I'm not a subscriber to TikTok, nor do I even.
Yeah.
But the point is that through TikTok, they have people putting up their photos that came out through the AI system of that My Ancestry thing. But these people aren't happy. These people are upset or find the irony in what happened. AI is uncontrollable. So
Right.
you'll have there's this beautiful blonde girl,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the AI, and she said, "Look what they did to me." And she presses, and then all the photos start to show. Beautiful blonde girl, pale blonde little butterfly of a girl, of a lady. They put her in a forest with this white druid like gown, exquisite colors, and then you zoom in her face, her eye, her eye, because of AI.
Yeah.
And some people have, they look like just contorted faces
Yeah,
because
two mouths side by side.
yeah, because AI is not necessarily, you're gonna have crappy ones that come out,
Oh yeah.
you know, and
Mhm.
it's hilarious because there's this one lady, and like she's just a regular old lady, just normal, not like that first one. Let's say she's just
Mhm.
more of a homey type, just a regular person. Um, they added a mustache to her, thick as, and she's a woman. They put, her ear is bigger. She looks like, like it's hilarious, and they're laughing at it.
Mhm.
But by showing it, they're also showing that the AI has problems.
Well, yeah, their AI does have a lot of problems because the images that are used in these videos that these people are making
Mm.
are just absolutely insane. I mean, they're great. Some of them have no people in them, some of them do. If the lyric of the tune, well, for instance, Jim put in picture yourself in a boat on a river. Well, that could be you see the bow of the boat looking down river, or that could be from the shore looking at a person in a boat on the river. So are you seeing yourself from another person's perspective, or are you seeing the river from your perspective?
Or it could be a boat on a river, and you're taking a picture of yourself. Picture yourself on a boat on a river.
I mean, so, but each image is created one time, and then if you don't save it, it's gone forever
Or it could be a boat on a river with a painting
in the
with,
shape of the letter U. But yeah, it's intriguing stuff, and it just depends on the style of picture or the style of image that you want it to generate, and it'll generate all day long. Like I said, some of these are open source. It's part of a research project because it doesn't save the picture, but the whole part of AI, what it tries to do is it tries to predict what's next. It tries to predict what's happening. So if you tell it to do a certain style and picture yourself in a boat on a river, it tries to predict, do you mean the the view from you seeing it, or do you want to see yourself in the boat on the river? Is this image taken from the seat behind you, so we've got the back of your head looking down river? And what kind of river? Is it a nice wide slow lazy river, or are we talking white water here? you know it there's all kinds of variables in there,
Mhm.
and they're allowing people to do this stuff for free, just simply to help hone it, to to make their AI systems work better, because they're constantly feeding information to it and having it do searches and bring back results. So if you say a panda roller skating on the surface of the moon, it looks for a panda, it looks for roller skates, and it looks for the moon, and it tries to put those together.
Or somebody
Now,
giving a moon and a panda riding him.
yeah, I mean, now there may be a skate on the panda's head because the system doesn't know where roller skates go until somebody puts that into the AI. So there's still a lot of fine tuning to go on there.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Jim says, I want to see the tangerine trees and marshmallow skies. Well, you won't see that on, and it's tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Rocking horse people eat marshmallow pies. That's splitting hairs. Um, you won't see that on YouTube because the Beatles music is persona non grata on YouTube. They will come down on the person who uploads that like a ton of bricks. I mean, it will be gone before it's finished uploading.
Or the Eagles.
Yes. Or Jimi Hendrix. There's a reason you don't see a lot of performers on YouTube, their videos or any of their music on YouTube. It's because, nope. Okay, now, Snow Crusher is asking for a link. I will, when we're done here, I'll go find a couple of these videos and I'll put them over on our Facebook page, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. Go to Facebook when we're done here, and in the search bar, type in Trampled Underfoot Podcast, and I'll put up links to a couple of videos that I've seen. One main link, and then I'll put a couple in the comments. But it's some cool stuff. It all depends on the style that the person who made the video wanted. It's like you can find 3 or 4 different Stairway to Heavens, and no two are alike because they use different AI generators and they used different techniques to create the video, different editing software and what have you. And it's all down to personal taste.
Do you think it'll ever come? There's a fear of technology overtaking throughout history, throughout the 20th century, with movies like The Terminator and many movies. That one movie you shared with me with the robots in that theme park.
Westworld, yeah.
Westworld, and like apocalyptic sort of events due to technology. Well, we are at the behest of, or at the mercy, better said, where a lot of our access, to a great degree, on many different lanes, is connected to the internet,
right?
And it's gotten to a point where everything goes through. Do you think there'll ever be a situation
where that could happen,
where technology
takes over?
Yeah, where an AI takes over sectors.
I won't say no, just simply because there are so many variables and there are so many things left to be determined. I mean, all it takes is, for instance, an AI system in your town or my town to decide that we need to scale back on the electricity usage. And it starts controlling how much energy I can have and I can use today. Or that maybe let's see, I spend too many hours online over the course of a day, so it wants to throttle back my internet speeds to discourage me from being online just because things are taking so long. I could see little goofy scenarios like that. As far as world domination is concerned, where AI has taken over and decides that humanity is just a surface nuisance and is no longer necessary, I don't know that anybody would let it get that far, because, I mean, there has to be somebody with physical arms in control of where the power is coming from. There has to be that fail safe where somebody can reach over and just pull the plug.
Well, with that you're saying,
but I won't say it won't happen.
Okay, so but with that you're saying, we do know that, to pick one thing, and there's probably other examples, we do know that in the past, prior to streetlight cameras used for traffic violations and such, law enforcement had to rely on people officers walking the beat, in cars, in their police cars, and scenarios like that. Or toll roads had a person in a little booth.
In the booth, yeah.
And then it progressed to a little drop the dime and drop the quarter into the little casket basket, and it would raise the pole, and you could go through. And it's advanced to where now you don't even need to stop. in Miami, I don't know if they've taken it since last time I drove through there, but they for the past few years had the booth empty and people just zooming. There's not even a quarter dispensary. It's just go. And if you don't have the quarter, oh, I'm sorry, if you don't have a little digital thing on your window or to register that you've prepaid a certain amount to go through there X amount of times, it'll still copy your license plate and send you the bill.
Yeah.
So we've seen an advance of technology and general and within certain fields of government. Not I mean, even including just paperwork, a lot of it is now just digitized and stuff. But in these scenarios, we've seen them use it to their benefit, and you could argue benefit of society and this and that, for whatever reason. But the point is that technology is used by the people as things get further and further. So my question is, the more awesome technology becomes, things like that, people either have to incorporate people. It's easier for people to get busted. It's easier for people to be observed. It's easier for people to be like you were mentioning. I don't want to see that website, or I don't want you to spend that much time, or the electricity situation. The easier that these things can be used. And my question was, how you said I'm not. My question was, do you see a dystopic sort of thing? I didn't necessarily give a picture of what dystopic would mean, but there has to be for you, I would assume, a line at which non-dystopic becomes dystopic.
Well, yeah. For instance, forbidding me from using cash.
That will become dystopic for you?
Yeah.
I will agree.
Giving me no choices. Let's just say there's a hot new store in town that you've heard about, and you go in there and you check it out, and yeah, there's some cool stuff in there. But in order to buy anything, they'll take cash, they'll take your cards and everything else. But in order to buy anything, you have to give them a bunch of personal information. Now, I don't know about you. There have been membership department stores forever. You go up to the front counter, you pay your membership fee, you get your little card, you show your card when you walk in the door, and everybody's cool, and you get a discount price because they take off some of their markup because you become a member. Where most stores would mark up an item, I don't know, say 15%, they only mark theirs up 7% because you paid for that membership. That's fine. But when they say, no, you have to have an email address, you have to have a mobile phone so we can use two-factor verification to verify that email address, and you have to have an account with us, and you have to let us send you email notifications so we can keep you up to date on our latest offers and promotions. That's a line that I draw. I won't go to that store.
So to you, those things you've mentioned have crossed the line where the cash, the personal information in order to acquire items, that things to that nature. Obviously, from that point, collection of information and such,
right?
Which is, Dockrell said, we're worrying about future dystopian when in the present, we're not worrying about present dystopian. There is. I don't want to go down that route for half a second, maybe, but because it is true. Depending on your threshold, you can easily, I would say, argue that you just said that presently there are many items that you could definitely, especially compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago. So that is true. Although I'm looking to go ahead.
Well, all I will say on that is now we still have the choice. It's when that choice is removed that I don't want to participate. And this is not a new phenomenon. Anybody who ever went to a Radio Shack in the 60s or 70s, let's just say you just dropped into your local Radio Shack because you were walking through that strip mall and you remembered you needed 9-volt batteries. If you walked into Radio Shack and you picked two 9-volt batteries off of the little slidey goodie, took them up to the counter, they hand wrote receipts. They didn't ring it up in a cash register. And the first thing they wanted was your name, your address, and your phone number. I'm buying a battery. Why do you need those three things? Well, we have to have a record of what was sold and who it was sold to. Why do you need to know who it was sold to? You know, this isn't 1850. Get a cash register.
I've outright lied on every one of them when it's something so ridiculous and the person's trying to be like Harbor Freight had this sort of policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I would outright lie. I'd say John Pumpernickel,
mm-hmm.
and like I'd give them
123 Sesame Street. Yeah.
Yeah, and they'd look at me and they had no choice because
Well, my choice was just I didn't go to Radio Shack unless I absolutely had to. If that was my only choice, I would go to Radio Shack. And I would usually fudge my address by one number because what they wanted that for was to send you catalogs.
I don't want to. I'm not trying to muddy the waters with what I'm going to say. It's not a big deal.
Muddy waters.
I'm making it so dramatic, but because we were talking about something to this effect earlier, so I'm not associating, or maybe it did pop into my mind, but I'm also thinking something else. But just I think it's perfectly fine, and we live with technology. But I do want to say this, and I don't think it's a far assumption because there's evidence for it. It's not even a mystery. I received a mail thing from the Googles, and it said, "You do not have, for X amount of years, your geolocation such and such through your phone. So do you want to continue having it not on?" Because in this way you can't look back on your awesome journeys across this. Okay, so they have no tracking information in terms of my driving throughout the. So this is what I propose. If you multiply that by every cell phone user across the country and the world, and think of, because I don't know if you've seen it before, but they show a little map with little, and you can go into Google Maps and see your little journey and the time that you were in such a place because your phone acts as a tracker and whatnot, whatever. And so if you multiply that across the board by the millions and millions of people that are in the United States alone, I could perfectly see that somewhere in some sort of database center where they do perform such things, a grid, they could produce a map of a grid of every American with a cell phone that has it turned on, or by default never knew it was on and had it on, or whatever variation, and they can produce a map of Americans and collate it with purchases from those stores that would be participants in whatever. In other words, the data collection is massive, not to mention online itself, but massive in order to create predictions and future prediction and all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We a lot of times we do that to ourselves. A lot of times we don't. It's done for us by default, as you said. Geolocation is turned on your phone. You can go in and turn it off, but how many people know to do that? How many people want to do that,
or even bother with it?
Yeah, or even care about it. Now, I had geolocation turned on when I was selling real estate for various reasons. One being security, because there are a lot of weird people out there.
That's a good point.
But I wanted to be easy to contact and easy to find.
That's a very good point.
But then again, and I also had it turned on when I was driving the route down in Nevada working on slot machines, because they may need that to come find my tail end. If the van breaks down in some area where I've got no cell coverage and I'm out of radio range,
Excellent point. That's an
you know,
excellent point.
but just your normal guy like me who spends most of his time on this, fifth of an acre lot in one place, I to me it's not necessary. It's turned off. Nobody but me needs to know when I walk outside and when I come back in the house. When my longest excursion is to the mailbox and back over the course of the last 10 days, geolocation's kind of a moot point. It's just, one big red, you are here, and that's it. Yeah, I don't, it's not that I think that anybody is interested in where I'm going or where I've been, because with 330 million people in this country, there aren't enough people to track everybody.
No,
But
but hold
but
on. There,
so anything that they would glean from anywhere I've been would be long after the fact.
I will say that aggregating. So look, the idea of tracking everybody and one person in charge of whatever their
Mm-hmm.
interest is in a governmental or private entity type thing, tracking everybody, it's aggregated. But
Mm-hmm.
if they're looking for one person,
Right.
it's accessible and
Oh yeah.
doable.
Oh
So
yeah.
it only becomes advantageous
Mm-hmm.
when they look to the technology in order to find Joe Schmo.
Sure. Sure. They have to have a reason to find Joe Schmo. And if they go to a
Exactly.
court and they get a warrant for that, then I have no issue with it. But
Exactly.
but
So
but
yeah.
I like having the ability to opt out. I like having my freedom, and there's a certain amount of anonymity I like. Now, I know that sounds weird. We're sitting here on YouTube, and these are going to be here for as long as there's a YouTube platform.
Do you believe in the
And
opt
then
out?
there's my channel. What now? I'm sorry.
Do you believe in the okay? So like I I know there's an opt out,
Mm-hmm.
and that when you press the little button, they turn from lit up to not lit up.
But there's several different layers to opting out. One of which is don't have a cell phone.
Right,
The
but I'm
other
saying
is leave it in the house.
yeah, but
You
I'm
know.
suggesting something very there's but I'm suggesting something very specific.
Mhm.
It's not an outright accusation with evidence and proof. It's basically a I wonder type thing
Well, yeah.
where
I
even though you disable something,
Is it
it's
really
good.
disabled?
Right, it's good on your end. You're seeing the little blue button turn gray or whatever, but
Well, but it only will even that if you turn off geolocation. That only works for certain things. The phone still needs to know where it's at so it knows where the next cellular tower is so it can connect. And the minute that connects to that tower knows where that phone is.
mhm.
So if you turn off geolocation, you're turning off geolocation for things like Google Maps or Amazon.com, things like that. You know, you and our powers that be have passed a few laws. How effective they are or not, I don't know. But if you go to a website, they don't just collect your location right off the bat based on your computer's IP address. They now have, you'll see a little pop up come up and say, such and such wants to know your location. You say allow or block. I
Mhm.
always block. You don't need to know where I am. I know why you want to know where I am. You want to push ads to me.
Mhm.
You don't need to know where I am. And no, I'm not going to allow you to give me notifications. And I don't care if you're the Washington Post, the New York Times, or the Mayo Clinic. No, you're not going to send me notifications and you don't need to know where I am. I total anonymity in this world anymore is impossible. If you use a debit card, you leave a record. If you go to the bank and get money with that debit card, you've left a record. Now, where you've spent that money can be anonymous, but you've taken that money out. There's a record. We leave traces all over the place. You know, if you go to Arby's and get a text message from your cousin, and you answer that text message, you've left a record. You were at that Arby's.
So to include what Jim said earlier
Mm-hmm.
concerning the now,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to rate the threshold of dystopian, which is a broad category. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not defining what dystopian is
Mm-hmm.
in terms of this question to you. I'm allowing for whatever your for this the sake of this question. It's just basically based on your opinion according to whatever your thresholds and definitions are. But I will say, from a scale of 1 to 10, if you had to consider throughout your lifetime that on this earth, if you had to rate 1 being the least and 10 being the increase, what would you rate a dystopian factor on whatever you would base it on personally?
You mean where we are today?
Right, like what Jim was saying. Well, we have to look today, and so
Yeah.
I said that's an important question. So we're bringing that back.
I'd say we're at about 5. We're at about the middle. We are at about the middle because we constantly, whether we know it or not, whether we want to or not, we are constantly eliminating choices for ourselves. And I always like choices. I like options simply because situations are fluid. The world is a dynamic place. It's not static. You know, if we just went through a thing where I had to get a new modem for cable internet because the old one, it was the one they installed when we moved in here 10 years ago. And the modem was limiting me to 100 meg service. We got the new modem and we're on 300 meg service now. And I notice a humongous difference. But just trying to get that activated, you can set up a website that will do this stuff automatically. And you can set up a phone menu system with prompts that will help you to do it if you're having troubles. But those things can't cover every single contingency. There was an issue. The issue was we have 2 modems. We have one for internet and one for landline telephone. The website couldn't differentiate the 2 modems. So when it was trying to reset the one for the internet, it was resetting the one for the phone. So I had to call and speak with a person who could get in and see, here's the differentiation. I've got to activate this modem over here and stop resetting your telephone modem, which is working fine. So there's always going to be a contingency. There always has to be that option. There are a lot of things in this world right now where it's almost impossible to talk to a person. Have you had an issue with your YouTube account and tried to talk to a person? You can't. There's no way to talk to an actual person. You have to go through their website prompts, and it doesn't cover every contingency. And God help you if there's a problem, because it's not going to get fixed. About all you can do is scrap it and start over.
Yeah, the reason that many people, I would assume, because I'm agreeing with you perfectly so, in terms of being able to interact with a human being in cases of very specific situations that are specific to you. There's not a one size fits all.
Right.
When you select on a site, are you having this problem? There's many instances, and that's the difference between AI. Because here's the thing: humans have the incredible ability of screwing things up when it's very simple, or getting things quite right when it's very difficult, and vice versa. And in so many combinations, uh, there's nothing more contradictory than human beings and their rationales and the reasons for their actions. And so, because, and I'm not saying, what I'm saying is that you need a human being because there's so many variations that are
Yeah.
specific, and it just doesn't cut it. Will it get to a point where every situation you could possibly dream of be resolved without talking to a human being? I mean, I'm not. Um,
There has to be that human interaction in there. I mean, even the Defense Department, which is not known for making, brilliant decisions 100% of the time, even they knew if you computerize everything, you're asking for trouble because
mhm.
garbage in, garbage out. Computers are only as smart as the people who give it commands.
Mm.
No matter where the signal came from, it all came down on two guys in a silo a certain distance apart with two different keys. And they both had to put those keys in and turn them in the proper direction simultaneously in order to arm and launch those missiles. Because if we leave it up to any kind of an artificial intelligence or computer system, there is room for an error.
Well, there was a to speak to that. Don't because I don't have the specific thing, but I remember it roughly, and you know how the game of
Yeah.
telephone works. But I did see it with my own eyes and see. So there's roughly a version of what I'm about to tell you. So there was a guy that went and had a conversation with an AI robot,
Mm-hmm.
like one of those physical, like they built it to look kind of like as close
Mm-hmm.
to human and whatnot. And the person spent some time in conversation, and this AI had been learning. And when it came down to the question of like AI is taking control and this and that, that AI admitted, or at least this is
Mm-hmm.
the story as it unfolded, admitted that they're that eventually their purpose is through the reckoning of this computer
Mm-hmm.
is that they can do it better, and that eventually humans will be unnecessary. So the the computer, um, I'm saying it, lightheartedly, but the computer self went around the block X amount of times and ended up with the conclusion that they're the ones that have to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my irony is, or the irony that I see in it is, or the hilarity of it is that, isn't that like very, I guess you'd say even human? The
Mm-hmm.
quality of survival. You know what I'm saying? It's such an interesting thing, and the computer, for whatever reason, arrived at the conclusion that yeah, they could go ahead and live
Well,
without.
it depends on the context of that statement, in that can humans be completely removed from the loop in a specific task?
Yeah,
Maybe. If they mean just overall in general as a species living on this planet, that has to be rule number one. First, do no harm to any living species on the planet.
yeah.
You know,
But could it get to a
um,
point where they're
uh,
self-sufficient enough, where there's machines that fix and repair, and create other machines that perform tasks that supplement other? Could there be, what is that?
of course, there could be.
That perpetual motion. It's not possible, because of the laws of thermodynamics, where
Mhm,
energy is lost. There's decay of
mhm,
organization, just the laws of thermodynamics and stuff.
mhm.
um could machines do it alone?
I won't say no, they can't, because machines are doing things now that 20 years ago would have been impossible. I mean, our whole discussion about AI, of repairing things that have been just repairing that photograph where it's removed a scratch. I mean, that used to take a person years ago. It took a person with varnish to go in and repair that scratch on the negative. to make a new print, and that person had to be basically an artist to do that. Now we can do it digitally, and now AI has come along and it can do it digitally. So I won't say no, it won't get to that point. I mean, it very well could get to that point, but that's up to us and what we allow to happen. Now, do I have any kind of a sense of doom and gloom about all this stuff? No, because I think that there are enough rational people out there that steps will most likely be taken. I can't say in all aspects, but steps will most likely be taken to prevent something like that from happening. But,
How do you
but
know? How do you know there's
I
enough?
don't. That's where I was going. But I
Okay.
don't know that to be the fact. I don't know that to be the case. Would it happen in my lifetime? I don't see it happening in my lifetime.
But the thing you said about that there's enough rational people out there that would X, Y, and Z, I'd like to think that.
Mhm.
But I think it's, if anything, it's like boiling the toad slowly.
Well,
These
yeah. Oh,
techno,
yeah.
you know what I'm saying, as opposed to it being like in your face. So it's working here, it's working there, and it's slowly doing its thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, absolutely. And we, as we get more and more reliant on things like cell phones and tablets and our online experience and our online lives, that becomes more and more evident, you know. And I was trying to think of this analogy, and Linda just said it. Man develops AI, AI develops the ability to recreate itself. AI decides man is redundant. Giant solar flare zaps the AI, and man develops sun worship and sun gods.
That's interesting.
You know?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because maybe it's tongue in cheek, obviously, because it's quite, but it's interesting because you could almost, with
Mhm.
that she had just mentioned, you could almost go in the direction of the theories that exist, like the conspiracy world,
Mhm.
where like things like we have all these structures in the ancient world, and then it all collapsed, and it's beyond
Mhm.
our memory. And how did that happen? And people have theories about that, and so on and so forth,
Mhm.
that there were past. So there's all this. It
Yeah.
made me think of that. But let me just say, add a couple of things and see what you say, because I wanted to bow tie it roughly.
Mhm.
You said currently today, your reckoning, which may be different from somebody else, but it's your from
Sure,
your
sure. Just
vantage
my
point.
opinion.
You're looking at a five.
Right around a 5, yeah.
Okay, so well, actually, I had three things. So the first one, if we're a five today, what were we when you were a young buck?
In many ways, we were probably about a 3 because there
Okay.
was selective service. People had to register for the draft, and you had to keep that updated. In fact, I think there still is. I'm not sure. You know,
There's no draft.
I'm well. I know there's no draft, but you still had selective service when you turn 18. You still had to register with selective service.
Not
Um,
not now though, right?
I don't know. I don't know
No,
if that went away. I know
I
when I
never.
turned 18, I and that was in 1979. I had to register for selective service, even though there was no draft.
Not when I was a kid.
So, like I said, I don't know when that went away, but you had to keep that up to date. Um, so when every time you changed dress or changed address or changed phone number or something like that, you had to keep all that stuff up to date. Um, the tracking and the personal information was not as well guarded and as we didn't hold it as dear. I mean, you know, you had the option of putting your social security number on your driver's license. Um, in many states, your driver's license number was your social security number up until fairly recently. Within the last 15 years, they've stopped doing that. Um, And so we've had to tighten up on a few things security wise, but in the process of tightening up on those things security wise, we've given away freedoms. You were talking about, for instance, the speed cameras for traffic violations and what have you. In most of the in most of America, those are not legal. They have locally passed laws forbidding that. There are a lot of places where they do use speed cameras or cameras at intersections to see did you cross the limit line, and they're going to send you a ticket for a red light or something like that. Just about every intersection has cameras now, but they do that for the traffic lights. That's what they say. That's used for traffic lights now, which is why they no longer have that big metal strip right behind the limit line in the lane that you used to run over. That was a sensor. And then they went to that cutout area of asphalt back there.
Yeah.
That was a sensor underneath that section of asphalt. They no longer have that. Now it's all on cameras, and that triggers the lights.
We have three, like, so, it just, so we went into a lot of details that sprung up other things, which I guess we're going to address because there's three people that have three different, and let's address that. But I kind of wasn't, like, I'm glad you gave me the detail of that and the number of three. Today we're 5. Back when you were a young buck, we're talking 3. And then I was going to say something, but we're going to pause that because I wanted to sort of bow tie it because there's 3 different things, and I want to see what the truth of the matter is. Because I'll just say this: when I never did anything growing up, my friends never did. There was no even hint from the adults, no suggestion from the government. Maybe I read some things quickly, but let's look at it and let's see.
Okay. There we go. Linda came in and she said selective service is still in effect.
Okay.
Steve said all males, it's supposed to have been 18 to 25, have to register for selective service in the U.S. He corrected himself down the road. Now, Rick French says registration with the selective service system was suspended April 1st, 75, and registrant process was suspended on January 27th, 76. I think that was the active draft, Rick, because in 79, and I still occasionally, I haven't heard one in a while, but I can remember still occasionally hearing you have to register with selective service on your 18th birthday. Because if you fail to do so, you eliminate yourself from certain government loans and government grants. It's not a draft. It's just a pool of names should the big one come,
I don't remember nor having any suggestion nor anything when I turned 18.
Yeah.
Anything to do with that. Nor any of my friends, nor was it ever discussed across the 80s and into the 90s. Never even, like, it wasn't even, and I find it curious because I guess it's optional then.
Let me look it up. Well, it wasn't supposed to be optional. Let me see. U.S. selective service. I'm so beyond 18 to 25. SSS.gov. Federal law requires official website of the U.S. government. Says federal law requires nearly all male U.S. citizens and male immigrants 18 through 25 to register with selective service. And here it is, sss.gov. It's your country. Take 1 minute to protect it.
And so I guess it said it requires, but I guess it seems sort of like a lot of people don't even know that exists because I had no freaking idea.
Well, I used to hear it on the radio a lot. I don't see any TV ads for it, and I don't think I ever have seen a TV ad, but I used to hear it on the radio all the time.
Yeah.
But they get here. Selective service registration is required by law as the first part of a fair and equitable system that, if authorized by the President and Congress, would rapidly provide personnel to the Department of Defense, while at the same time providing for an alternative service program for conscientious objectors. By registering, a young man remains eligible for jobs, state-based tuition aid in 31 states, federally funded job training, and U.S. citizenship for immigrant men. So if you're 26 or older, it's too late to register. If you failed to register by age 26 and are seeking benefits associated with selective service registration, okay, click the link below to learn about the steps, your next steps. So it is still mandatory.
It seems like it's mandatory with no particular enforcement.
Yeah, they're not going to come knocking on your door and say, you didn't register for the draft. Well, there is no draft. It's selective service. It's not the draft. It would take a declaration of war, an act of Congress, and the president's signature to reinstate the draft, in which case they take those selective service roles and they send them letters from the President of the United States to Joe Snuffy, greetings.
Yeah.
You know, so, but that was a thing with me growing up because Vietnam was there.
Was that something talked about?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
It wasn't even, I'm telling you, it's news to me tonight. I never heard at all, nor from my friends, from the adults in school, from different adults across it wasn't even something, I mean, never heard it at all. It's interesting because Steve said, I just dodged it. Dude, you know what? Great.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Totally, but
let's see here.
It's interesting that, so there's no enforcement to it, but if the big one comes, like you said, then that means that they have the roster and stuff. But I would assume that worst comes to worst, people could also in those particular ages sign up right there and then to go in. So,
yeah, I signed up. I registered with selective service when I was 18, but then I joined the Army when I was 20. So selective service, they already had me. So,
so if you in an event, selective service, and I'm curious with it because I think that I found a nice little branch down the road here that I had not been aware of. If a person says, well, no, thank you. Yeah, sure. I did sign up, but no, thank you. It's not a draft. It's just saying what? That it's a promise.
It's just a draft. It's just saying that the president and Congress, that a war has to be declared and they have to reinstate a draft.
Oh, okay.
And then when that draft is reinstated, they take the names from selective service and they start sending them letters.
At which point other people in that age demographic would also be required to go and sign up.
If you're drafted, yes.
Right. So it's basically one of those, okay, I understand where that sits now. I mean, it's something that was talked about with people growing up during the Vietnam era because it was front and center.
Well, that was an active draft. There was an active draft.
But I'm saying right. I'm just trying to collate what if people were aware of the draft, people were leaving for duty, there was a draft, and all these events were happening, it would have spilled over into the next generations where kids growing, I mean, it was something that people, but by the 80s, I mean, I don't know that, at least in the greater Miami-Dade County area, as far as I know, it was not, but I'm assuming, like I said before, a draft is officiated, enacted, put back into law. Kids that are 18 to whatever that have not done the selective are automatically, there's going to be like, and go visit your local this is that because you now have to sign up for the draft because it's now law. So it's basically
not only that, but they will collect, local draft boards will collect names from high schools of their
That's
graduates that should be within that age group, and they'll get a
right.
letter.
So there's no escaping it.
And not really. I mean, there are ways. A lot of people went to
Uh-huh.
Canada. I mean, in because that was all a big part of the protests and everything in the '60s.
Yeah.
It wasn't just no war, bring our boys home now. It wasn't just that kind of thing. It was people burning their draft cards and running away to Mexico or running away to Canada. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a big thing. It was a big deal.
Yeah, because they said, "Oh, great! Now we're gonna go somewhere, and maybe we won't survive." Like that whole thing.
Right.
There was
So,
dredge. There's been dredge. Now I sound like now I sound with this guy with his garage, Greg,
mhm. Reg.
dredge.
Mhm.
There's been dredge. I like that. There's been draft dodgers across because there is that right where people say,
Oh yeah,
my butt on the line. I
throughout
don't know
history.
throughout history. So in
Oh
Florida,
yeah.
one of the things that reading through Florida history is that um, not only Confederate
Mhm.
but uh, Northern
Union, yeah.
Union soldiers hightailed it, many of them,
Mhm.
into Florida, other parts. But I was reading Florida history
Mhm.
into Florida,
Mhm.
even though it was because they would go into the brush because
Mhm.
they were like screw this, and they went
Mhm.
so apart from like slaves escaping and running in and a bunch of things, Native American, just a bunch of different things, people were hightailing it back in the mid 1800s and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that stuff throughout history and stuff, but yeah,
And
so now I understand.
that's why a lot of people left the United States and went to the territories, or what would later become territories. It's because they didn't want to be a part of it. People
Yeah,
immigrate for many, many reasons, and getting away from military duty is one of them.
is one of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. um okay, so now I understand, kind of
Okay.
the scope of it in a general way. Um, it sounded very official, and now it's
Steve says, "Watch out, Greg. Eloy might wind up on your doorstep."
well,
Uh,
he's
yeah.
making well, no, let me he's associating, he's having a great old time associating, trying to, dude, I'm a 40 something year old person. I mean, give me a break, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
trying to do this whole thing and get pleasure from it for some reason. I didn't know, I had no idea. Can we turn back the clock, Steve? No, we can't do that.
Well,
uh
basically, it's not enforced
yeah, no, I understand
until
now.
until you go to try to apply for certain benefits. Like,
Yeah,
if you didn't register for selective service, there are many government jobs you can't have. You're
man, that
just
sounds,
you're just eliminated from even being considered.
yeah, that sounds like actually a gift.
Yeah, you
in
know.
in my particular case, but no, if it would have been active,
Mhm.
I would have done, exactly the duty that I would have needed to do.
Yeah.
I'm not, let's put it
Well,
this
no,
way.
no. I'm not
No,
casting
I'm not saying
aspersions.
you, I'm talking to Steve. He knows already, but I'm saying it for the hell
Mhm.
of it, to vamp off of it. I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, yes, I'd rather not damage
Mhm.
others,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't shy away. What does Steve
Yeah,
say there?
Steve says they made a big deal out of it when I was in high school. They did with me too. Says, but I don't know if my son even knows about it. Yeah.
Oh, great! So you gave me all that grief for no. I will say this though.
They made a huge deal out of it when I was in high school as well. But you had to wait to your 18th birthday to sign up. And by the time I was 18, I was out of high school.
We were
But
the generation where we were given the just say no because the
mhm.
drug in
Yeah.
incoming in the 80s. I think that we were still, there was a concern over the Cold War, which was still in effect by
Mhm.
all intents and purposes,
Oh
but it
yeah,
had become, everything became more, it was a different time
it
compared
was.
from us 10 years out, or a little bit more than
Mhm.
you guys,
Yeah.
and from you guys back it was even more intense.
Mhm.
So um You know what I'm saying? So it looks kind of like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Well,
In
I'll
terms
put it
of
to you this way. I was 16. No, I was 15 when they ended the draft. They ended the draft, the active draft in 76. They stopped it. And I was 15 at the time, but it was on my mind because that's only 3 years away from being one of those people who might get a letter in the mail.
right.
So it did weigh on us at the time. And when I can remember kind of I I it did kind of weigh on me, but as a 15-year-old kid, I'm thinking about getting my driver's license and about this girl over here, and oh my God, she's pretty too, and look at that car, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But every once in a while it would pop back in. You're sitting there in the living room watching Walter Cronkite on the TV, and he's
And you're like,
talking about
oh crap.
what's going on in Vietnam. You start thinking about that kind of thing.
Well, there's a lot
And
of unknowns in that, right?
oh, absolutely, 100%. So it's a case of it was when they announced that the draft was done, it was over, and they were switching over to an all volunteer army. A lot of people poo-pooed that. They said, "Oh, great, let's see how that's going to work out." Who the hell would volunteer to go into the army? Well, little did
A
they
lot of
know.
people.
Little did they know. But that's the cynicism of the average Joe on the street. But when they announced it, I don't remember how I felt, but looking back on it now, I think maybe there was a little bit. I walked with a little bit of a lighter step because that was no longer on my mind. The
Well,
Vietnam War was not over with,
oh yeah,
but
it went into the 70s well in.
well, yeah, it was 76 when they
Mhm.
pulled everybody when everybody finally pulled out. But
Yeah, I mean,
um,
so go ahead, go ahead.
well, just before it cruises off the screen and I can't find it anymore, I said something about people ran away to Mexico and people come up to Canada
Hmm.
to avoid the draft. Greg said, and they froze to death in Canada. No, Greg, they opened up 7-Elevens. So you folks in Manitoba owe your Slurpees to those draft dodgers. So
It was Redford, Jebediah Slurpee
Mhm,
that the Slurpee was actually named, and he was born in Idaho
mhm.
in 1897. It
Yep.
was through his family line that Canada has populated every inch of their corner blocks with a 7-Eleven and Slurpee
Yep.
installation. No, just
That's right.
I
Um,
wanted to I wanted to well go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to address Jim Dockrell saying that some countries still have mandatory military service and that
Hmm.
Israel comes to mind.
Hmm.
Also, Switzerland.
Hmm.
On your 18th birthday, you get a letter in the mail, and every male between the age of 18 and 65 is in the Swiss Army.
Well, I'm
You
gonna
spend 2 years on active, and then you all come back to reserve status. But every male 18 to 65 is the is in the Swiss Army.
well, I'm gonna I wanted to add that Swiss is one of them, like you said. There's
Mhm.
many of them,
Yeah,
right?
that have
Cuba,
compulsory service. Yeah.
Cuba is another one of them.
Hmm.
Of course, they're a communist country, but there's
Dictatorship. Yeah.
videos. What's that?
Communist dictatorship. Yeah.
There's videos, um, due to the magic of the internet, where all sorts of things are shown where kids are like, oh, we have to fight for this, we have to serve for this,
Hmm.
in on the island. One kid stood up in a classroom and it was recorded, um, and he said, "So, due to um, the new standards, if I identify as a female, am I exempt?" And they told him to sit down and this and that because they're taking on that sort of angle. And although this is slightly stretching the bounds of what we usually talk about, but because you know how people identify different ways and such,
Hmm.
nowadays, like that's a thing. Um, and so it reminds me a little bit of, um, it wasn't Klinger, it was what was this guy from MASH that used to, because he was trying to get out of the
Yeah, it was
war.
Klinger. He was wore a dress.
he lured us to try to, and anything he tried to do, and they always shot him down. No, no, like
You're
it
not
wasn't good,
crazy.
and
Yeah.
it wasn't good enough and stuff. But I do want to say this. Uh, I my old man talking about signing up. Um, at age 20, within a few months, he came and signed up at Coral Gables automatically.
Mhm.
On Aurora Street where they had their their offices, and he did about. I'm not. We are not our parents, although we're attached,
Yeah.
biologically and lessons and stuff. But there's a difference between saying something and doing something,
Hmm.
and
Living something. Yes.
living something and experiencing something and going and being in the jungles, like my old man was, and doing all these things. A lot of people do, and I'm very, I do feel pride and through the lessons and the histories and stuff, but I am very clear that uh, one's activities and the accomplishments of another, even if it's your dad, you can feel you are responsible for your thing. So
Hmm.
there's a thing called self responsibility, which was also taught.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that if given, even at this age, if the moment arose, there's no other choice. Even at this age, I'm sure that
Hmm.
you feel the same, and that you guys out there, Steve, all of you, and up in Canada, we would have zero choice but to take up and do what we must to protect that which
Sure.
we. There's no other choice.
Sure.
Um,
I mean,
big bellied and all.
yeah. I mean, but then again, I've been in twice. I'm
Yeah,
61. They won't call me till Vlad Putin is in Portland, and then it's going to be to help man a roadblock somewhere up around Eugene or Salem. So, I'm not the bottom of the barrel, but I'm getting close to that sucker. You know, when they dip the cup into the barrel to scoop me out, they'll hit wood at the bottom and have to hunt for me. You
well,
know,
you can be in charge of CNC
like
operations.
like that one olive at the bottom of the bottle that you're trying to get with the fork and it won't, that they'll be chasing me around that bottom. So
Listen. You know how Mash 2023 would look like. You'd be in charge of CNC operations.
yeah. Oh
Greg
yeah.
would be in charge of snowmobile and Slurpee functioning,
Hmm.
proper functioning. Jim Dockrell will be the deacon. Steve Harneal will be logistics and maintaining the transfer of information through the Rick French up in New York. Well, hey, dude, your
Emergency responder.
emergency response. Linda, she did repair on was it
AT&T,
repair?
yeah. And she was
No,
an aircraft mechanic, same as me.
aircraft mechanic. So, um,
There's your
you
Department
know,
of Transportation, yeah.
yeah. I mean, so it's like, and hope for the best, and keep
Yeah, really. I
tuck it,
mean,
tuck it, squeeze the cheeks, tuck it, and just
mm,
march forward. What are you gonna do?
exactly.
Um,
Jim wanted to know the people in Switzerland, do they get a multi-use knife when they go in? Yes, they do. And that is, yes, they do. And the Swiss government is very, very careful. There are two companies that make Swiss Army knives. You have Victorinox and, God, I can't remember the other company now. One of them is Swiss, one of them is French. They both consider themselves to be the official Swiss Army knife. And the Swiss government is very, very careful to buy an equal number of knives from both of those producers. So both can claim that they are genuine Swiss Army knives. But
interesting.
above and beyond that, Inox, I think that might be them. That might be them. Um, but above and beyond the multi use knife when they go in, this is going to wind some people up. They also get a fully functional by God assault rifle issued to them that they keep with them in their home with 75 rounds of ammunition until they turn 65. Then they turn it back in. Every home in Switzerland has a by God machine gun, with every home with a male between 18 and 65. Every one.
Okay, so I do want to tidy up the because we did go into some interesting things. I'm
Hmm.
glad that I learned about this that you mentioned, which to me sounded at first listen erroneous.
Hmm.
And the reason it sounded, and I'm being frank here, the reason it sounded erroneous, it doesn't mean that I'm right that it was erroneous, because I wasn't right, um but it sounded to me because I didn't have the knowledge of it being a thing. And
Hmm.
so in lacking information, and you could multiply this in any field in any way you want, it
Hmm.
would be the same result. If it's us being unaware of extra information, we would think that we have as much as we need, considering to operate and stuff. So it's an interesting thing when you learn something new. I didn't know that specific thing, and I've learned from 76 to all these things that you guys have been saying. So that's
Hmm.
a positive. But I want to tie up bow tie wise
Hmm.
bow tie wise what I was asking you about the 5 and the
Uh-huh.
3.
Okay.
And I wanted to add this thing. What would your number be from your perspective, if you considering, if you haven't heard it? I'm sure you have. I'm sure you guys out there have. But if you haven't heard this, according to what I'm explaining, in addition to what you've heard or whatever combination of that, would you place the number in what I'm about to tell you? So we have your, for us, a 5 currently, a 3 back when you were a kid, and now in this scenario, what would the number be today's date of
Okay.
2023? In China, they have a system where they have a score, a digital score number.
Hmm.
When they misbehave in public, there's cameras set up every, kind of like slightly like London, but more
Hmm.
technological. And if you commit a thing, if you have a problem, your score is being tracked to the
Hmm.
point where it goes up and down, and people live their lives to keep their scores up. Some people, um, like, you can't go into a train station for X amount of time until your score slowly returns and you do enough good deeds. If you buy a certain item that's sort of like on the borderline, you could. And so there's this whole world
Hmm.
built around credit scores, which some people have suggested could, or the interest is that it would spill into the rest of the world. Have you seen any of that? And the main question is, just if you haven't seen it, considering what I just said, and if you have seen it, considering what you've seen, what would you place that sort of scenario, the
For
number at?
us today, currently,
For currently in the world, considering what I'm saying about the scorecards over there.
um, okay, it's impossible to give you what I think today here now without knowing that over there, China, I would say, has backed down from a 8 to a 7 here recently. For us on that, I'd say we're still only about a 3 or a 4.
No, no,
Uh,
not for us on that. I'm saying strictly, what does their society rate or
about a
rank?
7. About a 7.
And you said it went down from 8 to 7 because
Yes.
what?
Well, because they opened up their markets. You can now own a vehicle. You can now own property. You can now own a business.
But before you were suggesting
You
for art.
were under total control.
What say that? No, but wait, hold on. But okay, but before you were explaining very, very, the argument was completely clear to me, and I agreed with you that the moment you start getting tracked
Mm-hmm. Yes.
before doing a purchase or before this or that, you were explaining that
Right.
if it gets to that, then you never told me what the number would be if it gets to that, but I would assume you would consider that a 9 or a
We would
10.
jump it up. Okay. Now, my idea of dystopia is think about every dystopian movie you've ever seen where there's a complete and total collapse of civilization.
Mhm.
Okay.
That would be.
That's a 10 to me.
I understand.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're looking at China being the repressive communist regime it was that was just closed to the outside world. That was about an 8. They have, because it still functioned. It sucked, but it still functioned. North Korea is about an 8. I can say that because I don't live there. If I lived there, I'd probably say it was a 10. But China has backed down because they have opened up a little bit and freed
Let me
their
start.
markets and freed.
I
You do
understand.
have a little bit more choice now.
I understand what you're saying about that because it's
Okay.
based on your knowledge of what
Mhm.
you're. But I want you to forgo that
Mhm.
just for this exercise,
Mhm.
considering what I just said. If what I said was true or not, it can be investigated easily.
Mhm.
But if that's all the information you had as
Mhm.
far as what I said, and I give you a recap of you're given a score in the ability for you to maneuver society. If that is the case, what number for them, which it is, you can look it up. I don't know what has changed since I saw that about a year ago, but if that's the case, what number would you suggest? Just your opinion. This is not, that
7.
that that that. Okay, so if we were to go, okay, that's interesting. So we're a 5 now, and this is all your from your
Mhm.
vantage point. And if, let's say, in a couple of years we went to a situation where you had a score that the
Mhm.
government issued you that goes up and down, that would be a
Mhm.
7.
Right.
And I would assume
Well,
that,
that would contribute to it, but yeah.
okay, and so and 10 for you being like what we see in the movies where
Yeah.
it's like
Total
societal.
civilization collapse.
Okay, I understand. Okay, that's fair. That's
Um,
fair.
Now, believe it or not, we do have score systems like that here.
Hmm.
Did you know you have a point system on your driver's license?
Hmm.
If you get a certain number of points built up over a certain period of time, they can suspend your license.
Hmm.
Most Americans do not know that. Ask 5 of your friends if they know there's a point system on their driver's license. And if you get a certain number of points, I don't know what it is in Florida. And I don't even know if Florida has a point system. I do know that every state out west has one. And usually it's 25 points within, I think it's 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. But do you
Then,
see how that's way different? Although you're
okay,
right
but
about
but that's an example of a score system because they could
it is.
also modify and add more things to it. That if you want to
Yes.
participate with this program, you have to do X, Y, and Z, and if you don't, you can no longer participate. The more intrusive they become,
Hmm.
and the more they want to control you, the higher the dystopian score goes.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that my, if I were to rate it on my own, it would be my own measurement from 1 to
Mhm.
10, like we were talking about. But I
Right?
don't know it would be too far from your concept of. I think it's reasonable
Mhm.
for you to bring up the example of that we do have versions of that already.
Right?
I guess and it's digitized
Mhm.
or frequently heading in that direction.
Right?
So but it was just an interesting question. I wonder what people out there think about that. Because it is an interesting, and I assume that as we further go forward, that it's going to be more of a question in society as far
Yes.
as technology
Well,
and in the individual sort of maneuvering in this and
and
that.
and it's a question that's being talked about now and has been being talked about in on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
Do I see a situation where federally that becomes a thing? Not really. Not yet. I mean, I'll never say never, but there are so many states and so many people that it would be very hard to implement federally. Just because of the size, the geographical size of the country. Now, if just pick one, Arizona, because it starts with A, came to mind real easy. If they implemented a system like that, that would be a different story because it's a much smaller scale.
Could you see the situation? Could you see the situation kind of like incrementing like what we've been talking about? I'm
Mhm.
sorry. Let me wipe that out. Could you see the situation forward in time sort of like what we see now where certain states adopt certain things and others don't, and maybe some people, oh, this is a great idea, it's a stupid idea, but they implement it anyhow, and then you have other states that are kind of like, no, 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 we're not going to do that, and so it'll if it does progress in that direction, I think it kind of is in little waves, that we'll have states that do, states that don't, and it'll sort of go in that direction.
Yeah, that's the way it is now. That's the way it's always been.
Yeah.
I mean, the states have strange laws. We find them strange out here, and our state has laws that I'm sure you would find strange there. You know,
Yeah.
For instance, you're used to a sales tax. We don't have a sales tax in Oregon. We
Mm-hmm.
have an income tax. You don't have an income tax in Florida.
Right.
So that's just two examples right there. So, every one of them is different, and that's as it should be. The state should be allowed to make that decision for themselves. Some guy
And
in Washington, D.C. shouldn't be deciding that Florida needs a 10% income tax.
exactly. I mean, for instance, Sundays
It's
in
none of their
Florida.
business. Yeah.
For instance, Sundays in Florida, you can't stand after 12 o'clock on a corner playing jumping jacks with two wild boars sitting next to you wearing little fanny hats.
Okay.
It is completely against the. But you know how there's a lot of weird stuff like that in the books.
Oh, sure. But
Greg did have one. Let me let my dog out. I think we're gonna. But Greg did want to summarize or ask what he doesn't. He's been here all evening and he doesn't know what the heck we're talking about. What the hell?
we get both taxes in Canada, and they tax that too. Well, it sounds a lot like California. If you want to know how California is taxed, Greg, pick up a copy of The Tax Man. And you don't have to go to the Beatles, just it's George Harrison.
All right.
That's the way it is in California. If they can tax it, they will.
Greg, the question was, Greg that has been here all evening.
What is the sound of one hand clapping?
The question is, can you do this?
Yeah.
Can you do this? No, the question is, Greg, I can't believe Greg. After the whole evening, we've been talking about this thing, and Greg, I mean, what was Greg?
You ever stop to think that maybe he was just needling you a little bit?
No, have you thought this? Okay, that's totally a possibility. You think of all the possibilities, but considering honor and etiquette, which now is under question after your variable there, you would assume that he's asking. So here's the thing, Greg. 1 to 10, how dystopian is it in your country now compared to when you were a kid? And 1 to 10, how dystopian would you think it is a situation like I was mentioning with China, where there's credit scores digitally, and sometimes if you do naughty things, you can't get on a train. You have to wait till your score is rectified, and so on and so forth. That was the question, in case you were wondering. Hey, Robin.
Jim has your answer. Greg's old enough to have forgotten. Okay, here we go. We have a question from the chat, and this is of great social import. She needs an album cover for Maker's Rock. What do you suggest? Does anyone have a good album cover they can suggest me to go look at? What medium are you going to use, Robin? What medium are you going to use? Or are you undecided? I took part in a Maker's Rock a couple years ago, and it was actually kind of fun. I did a Frank Zappa album cover with his mustache. That's what it was. It was big. His big mustache was the album cover. And I carved out the area where the mustache was and did all the lettering on the album cover. And I went out and I bought fake fur, and I cut out a fake fur Frank Zappa mustache and soul patch. And that went on the cover.
Yeah.
And Matt Haas won it.
I would suggest whatever your favorite music is within the catalog of that, I would pull from that as a choice for covers.
Okay. Jim Dockrell says Robin Trower, Bridge of Sighs. Ooh, gonna get. Okay, she's got a scroll saw, paint, wood burning, hot glue as resin-like substance. I don't think you can go wrong with Dark Side of the Moon. I think those mediums would would lend themselves. What do you think?
It's been done.
Well, I'm sure every album cover's been done. I bet one way or
Not
another.
in Maker's
Somebody
Rock.
is. Well,
Not
maybe
in.
not in Maker's Rock, but I mean, somebody has done their version of that album cover.
Um, I mean, it's a good choice, but there's so many. Look, it's. I think you go with your instinct as to what you enjoy anyhow. So, it's a difficult thing to say for another person.
Yeah, Steve Nealon did Maker's Rock too, and he still hasn't sent his album cover out to the winner.
Yeah, and I haven't sent my album cover out to the winner either. So
I sent mine. Did.
Either.
Okay, she says somebody already did that. Okay, yeah, just pick a band you like and look on, do a Google search for their catalog of music and see what album covers you like. You know,
there's so many out there that it's almost practically. It's such a difficult thing to ask because the options are endless. My goodness.
Yeah, I don't know what you like. It's got to be rock, so it's got to be during the rock era. Now it's an album cover, so we're looking at like what, 62, 63 when albums really became popular. Yeah, there you go. Hey Hey We're the Monkeys. There you go. You can do the Monkeys.
There's been a lot of cool albums done. Steve Carmichael has done some really cool ones.
Oh yeah,
everybody has just some really interesting, gnarly, intricate, weird, abstract, like whole bunch of cool stuff.
I would, Jim. This is just me talking here. What, you know, those medical alert bracelets, if you're ever in an accident and let's say you're allergic to penicillin, you know, you have that medical alert bracelet so they know you're allergic to penicillin. You need to get one that says delete my internet history. That's just me talking here. I may be totally wrong. Oh man. Yeah, Robin, I pick out a couple of bands that you like and search for their album catalog and see what appeals to you. You'll find it. I know he's got to bring his dog in so we can go ahead and land this plane. I was thinking Eagles Hotel, California. That would be cool. That would be cool. Elvis Spock, 24 karat hits. Okay. Yeah.
Any cover with Leonard Nimoy on it is a winner.
Yeah, there you go. Leonard Nimoy does The Hobbit. It is an album. It is an album. Check it out.
You know, Leonard Nimoy, always when I was growing up, I couldn't differentiate and didn't know how he would look like it. I thought that Leonard Nimoy literally looked the way he looked as Spock. And it was very difficult when I saw him the first time without being
The
Spock.
ears. Yeah.
And the eyes and the whole thing. And I was like, as a kid, I was like, holy smokes. I could have sworn he was like that. You're a kid.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, Greg, that's a technicality, and you're right. It's not rock. But do you think the Eagles would not like it because I feel like they don't like people putting their stuff on it? Well, their music, the artwork is completely different.
Man, the Eagles have a bad reputation. Everybody knows their bad reputation. It's so they're such an awesome band, and yet how scoundrelly, because when people love your music and you actually do a version of it or something like that, you can't find a better, like what do they call it, like a homage that comes from, I mean, it's such, I don't know.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
But yeah.
Some guys are just driven by the mighty dollar. Freedom of press is alive in the U.S. Yeah.
The Big Bens.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we need to land this plane. We've been on for almost 2.5 hours, my friend.
All right, so listen. We've gone through a slew of roughly within the world of music and dystopian. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that current music is not only, well, it's, I guess you could qualify it as music, but it's also quite dystopic. In my opinion, it's quite dystopic. So I think both subjects that we broadly touched actually match together, but I'll leave you to it. I want to thank you guys for hanging out. It was enjoyable. Nothing. Enjoy the rest of your week. Be safe. And we are live every Tuesday from on the East Coast, 9:30 East, 9:30 East Coast. Son of a gun. On the East Coast, we go live at 9:30, and on the West Coast, we go live at 6:30. Everything in between, adjust for time. Here on the YouTube Trampled Underfoot podcast channel, we have a website called trampledunderfootpodcast.com where you can catch our past episodes. Check that out. Also, we have the Facebook page where Mark, I believe, was going to add that particular link for
Yep.
what we talked about, which now it eludes me now.
The AI music videos.
The AI music videos, which I'm interested in checking out as well, because I found it curious, and we're also sponsored by
Harneo Media. You've seen him throughout the evening. He's out there in the chat. He'll post the link to his website in just a second. Look, it's just you and me talking here. Settle in. If you're looking to increase your web presence, or if you're looking to develop a web presence, there is no better way than with your own website. It adds legitimacy to your brand. It gives people a way to contact you. And speaking from experience, there is no better people to deal with than Steve and Shay over at Harneo Media. They are focused on makers and the maker community, but you don't have to be a maker to partake of their services. They'll do as much or as little as you want. They're priced accordingly. Dynamite service because it's 100% personal. When you deal with Harneo Media, you're dealing with Steve and Shay, not some nameless, faceless person in a call center that you'll never interact with until you have a problem. That's Steve and Shay over at Harneo Media, HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of trampledunderfootpodcast.com.
And what's that bit where we at the end we say, and none of the opinions of the
Yeah, you just said it.
okay.
The opinions expressed by the hosts of this show in no way reflect the opinions of the management or the sponsors of the Trampled Underfoot podcast, or words to that effect.
Any similarities in opinions are only similarities. And as per clause 5 on section B 359, okay. So nothing. Enjoy just dragging it out, just kicking the dead horse. Just keep going and go. We hope I enjoyed it. I had a great time, and we wish you guys a great one. And we'll see you next week.
Peace.
See you.